Wandavision gave us its series finale and literally asked more questions than it answered. Let's break down the last episode. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to Comic Book Nostalgia. I'm CB Nostalgia, and we have a little breakdown of the finale of Wandavision. Well, I think everybody had a pretty darn good time with that last episode of Wandavision, and although lots of questions were answered, there was more than a plethora of new things to try to figure out. So I thought it would be a great time to break down the latest episode and talk a little bit about what's going on. Now, before we break all of this down, I wanted to remind everybody to hit that like and subscribe button and ring the bell for all the updates. Also, don't forget about the big giveaway. We're going to give away this PlayStation 5. All you have to do to get in on this giveaway is be a subscriber and leave a comment. Well, this week's episode of WandaVision brought the whole series to a conclusion, and lots of fairly interesting stuff went down. There are as many new questions as old questions, so I thought it would be a great time to dig into a couple of the issues. Now, many of the things people predicted didn't happen. No Sorcerer Supreme, no Mephisto, and no Arcana Jones. But once this was clarified, they opened up tons of other doors, so I thought it would be a good time to break them all down. So let's kick this off with the White Vision. We got teased with the White Vision at the end of episode 8, and it was pretty clear there was going to be a head-to-head showdown between both versions of the character. The actual physical fight between the two was pretty cool, but quite honestly, the Shippatheus discussion made the scene. And once we finished up with Vision, this is where the questions start. Clearly, the White Vision was fully awakened, and although we left the scene almost immediately, I do not think we've seen the last of this character. Just like in the comics, characters don't really ever die, and Vision appears to be back in full form, even if the original version of Vision, or at least Wanda's creation, no longer exists. It's still unclear how Wanda will react to this new version of the Vision, even if he is fully awakened, but based on what we know from the comics, the Vision is going to be around for a really long time. Now, Vision wasn't the only family member who had questions answered. And I don't think we've seen the last of Billy and Tommy. Now we'll get to that post-credit scene in a second, but like the version of Vision that lived in Westview, these versions of her kid were pure constructs of Wanda's chaos magic, and they could not exist outside of the Hex. I'm not gonna lie, those emotional goodbyes were pretty tough, but clearly Marvel did not make all of these decisions just to put these characters on the shelf and forget about them. I also enjoyed Wiccan and Speed in action versus the Sword Agents. I could have used a little more, but they didn't overdo it. Wiccan and Speed are a huge part of the Young Avengers, and we know many other Young Avengers are being seeded in the MCU, so there's no way this is the last time we've seen these characters. The episode also saw Agnes, aka Agatha Harkness, basically imprisoned in Westview. Now, we opened this episode with her pretty much trying to claim Scarlet Witch's chaos magic for herself, and that's what led us directly to that final battle. Her power set of being able to suck energy from other magic-using creatures was pretty cool, but I do think she's going to end up being more complicated in the Marvel Universe than we really know. Now, her sentence in the city was kind of sad, but keep in mind, she's a pretty powerful witch, and I feel like somewhere up around 100% chance she will eventually break free. Her character is pretty darn big in the Marvel mythos, and there's no way she was one and done in the series. Actually, in the comics, she's a mentor to the Scarlet Witch, and I suspect they will continue their contentious relationship at some level or another, but we'll have to wait and see. Now, Monica Rambeau was also a big part of this episode, and we got a big tease for her future too. I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't really expecting this one, and her post-credit scene caught me off guard. We had speculated that her Skrull friend from Captain Marvel was the engineer, but clearly not. Now we found out a friend of her mother's wanted to meet with Monica, and she's clearly referring to Carol Danvers. This to me seems to indicate that both her and Carol Danvers will both appear in the upcoming Secret Invasion series coming from Marvel. One of the things I liked about Monica in the finale is there's a lot that was left unresolved. We know she has her powers, and now she will be allowed some off-screen time to develop them a little bit, allowing her to open strongly in the next series or event she shows up in. Most of our civilian characters also had quite a bit happen. Darcy had a great conclusion taking out Hayward, who's on his way to jail, and clearly Jimmy Woo is headed into some sort of leadership position and will be a much bigger part of the MCU. I have to say, I love people's reaction to Jimmy Woo in this series. Such an underrated character, and I love how he is evolving in the MCU from somewhat of a clown to an actual, real, likable action hero. So let's talk about Ralph Boner. Throughout the series, we heard Agnes talk about her husband, Ralph. Speculation ran rampant that Ralph was actually Mephisto. As a matter of fact, for a while everything seemed like it was Mephisto. But we found out by the end of the series, not quite the case. Evan Peters' character appears to, at least on the surface, to just be a resident of Westview that Agnes took advantage of. Once Monica removed the necklace, he seemed to be normal again. But there are a couple questions here. Now, many fans may have found this sort of disappointing. There's a lot of speculation this was really Quicksilver. And the use of his powers within the Hex could go either way. It's highly probable that Agatha just gave him those powers within the Hex. But there's also that possibility of Jimmy Woo's witness protection guy. You remember, Woo was going there initially to meet somebody, and it very well could have been this character. With a name like Ralph Boner, and what we know about the Evan Peters version of Quicksilver from the Foxverse, that really does sound like a name somebody would pick while in witness protection. He very well may not be Quicksilver from the Foxverse, but I haven't totally given up on what he is in the show. It very well may have just been a little joke and we're done, but based on the fan reactions, I think we might see some more clarification. I don't think I've seen Marvel fans this vocal about a joke since the Mandarin. Another big reveal was the Darkhold. Now, there's been tons of speculation on what this book is, and many people did think it was the Darkhold. We had held out it could be some other magical books. There have been several in the Marvel Universe and even inside the MCU. But it is pretty clear this is the actual Darkhold for Kevin Feige's world. Now, the Darkhold opens up so many opportunities for horror in the MCU, especially when it comes to characters like Blade and Ghost Rider. I definitely don't think we've seen the last of it, and it's clearly going to be the seeds of something new. Kevin Feige reissuing the Darkhold in this series does speak volumes. To me, what it says is that old Marvel TV stuff will not be used. Or mostly won't be used, because the Darkhold was a big part of Marvel television in the past. We're clearly going to see more of it, probably in the Doctor Strange movie, and it's absolutely driving Wanda into darkness. And that brings us to Wanda herself. Now, a lot happened with Wanda in this episode. First and foremost, in our mortal world, what's her current status with law enforcement? The citizens of the town are clearly not happy with what Wanda did to them, and she is kind of a villain in this series. Her madness drove her to do some pretty horrible things, and although I don't think she meant to hurt anybody, that typically doesn't matter in the eyes of the law. She's obviously hiding in that cabin to avoid some of these consequences. And I do have to say, that cabin really did remind me of the cabin Bruce Banner was hiding out in at the end of The Incredible Hulk. Now the big takeaway from that scene was the dual forms, and the tease at the end in that post-credit scene. The full-on Scarlet Witch working with the Darkhold is absolutely scary. Wanda clearly doesn't fully understand her powers, and dabbling with some of these dark arts will only lead us to something very scary. There's also her hearing her kids' voices while working with the Darkhold. Not to beat a dead horse, but once again, I believe this is Mephisto. Now we know from the comics the kids actually had a little shard of Mephisto in them used in their creation. I think Marvel will eventually use some variation of this, but clearly her kids are going to be the driving force in Wanda's current madness. She did have very solid goodbyes with Vision, and that kind of felt resolved, at least until she meets the awoken White Vision. But I think her dilemma with her children is going to be the driving force in her emotional pain moving forward. Now the series doesn't have another season planned. This was actually called a series finale, and when you watch it you kind of understand. We clearly haven't seen the last of many of these characters. Wanda and Vision will obviously be back, Monica is headed into space to meet Captain Marvel, and both kids are clearly going to be a part of that plotline in the Multiverse of Madness. So, what did you guys think of this episode, and what do you think of all these sort of cliffhanger details left behind by Marvel's first series? And would you like to see Wanda get her own series again, or do you think this little Wandavision niche has kind of been played out and you want to see something different? Sound off in the comments below. If you like this video, make sure you press like, click subscribe, and if you don't ring that bell, you won't get any updates.